Hi, welcome to the Existential Stoic podcast. This is episode 32. I'm Danny. I'm here with my buddy Randy.
What's up, Danny?
What's up, Randy? And today we're going to talk about the benefits of lying. Can lying help your life?
That's like the exact opposite of what everybody teaches us since we're a little kid. They say if you lie, you go to hell.
I know. It's like straight to hell with you. Yeah, it's interesting. So like I had this I was listening to something this week and I heard this study that was done where they found that liars have more white matter in their brain, so they have more neural connections, which on the one hand kind of makes sense, right? Like if you lie a lot, I guess it's like rapid thinking. You can think quicker and make connections for excuses, I guess, faster. But the other flip side of this that they were talking about was that there seems to be a connection between a certain amount of self-deception and happiness and success. And that people that are more realistic and more sort of like, I guess, realistic about their abilities, what they can do, often fail more and are unhappy. Whereas people that are more sort of, I guess, I don't know I guess like over emphasize their abilities or believe they can do whatever are actually end up doing more in life. And the example they gave that I thought was really sort of like really captured the whole idea was they said that, Olympic athletes, most of these athletes, when they are preparing for the Olympics and ready to go, like they think of themselves as the best. And if they didn't think of themselves as the best, they wouldn't be able to compete at their top level, right? So I just thought it was interesting. I mean, do we need to lie to ourselves a little bit in order to be happy and live a good life and, achieve our goals?
That's a really important question because we're taught so often in life that lying is bad and lying is terrible. But then everybody's doing these little white lies and they're like, oh, but they're okay. Lying is terrible, but a little white lie. If your wife or your girlfriend asks if she looks bad in that, you need to tell her she looks okay. And it's like these little things are okay, but then lying about other stuff is wrong. And it's kind of like where's the cutoff? Because I've always asked myself that question, like how is this okay and that not? And it kind of almost goes along with like, do we actually know the truth? Do we actually know what is real?
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up too about asking yourself that question. So like in ethics, when we talk about this issue of like white lies, there's even some theories that suggest that it's fine. Like utilitarianism, right? They're consequentialists. They look at, they evaluate moral actions based on, the consequences and particularly happiness produced. So a white lie in those cases is totally acceptable as long as, you're producing more happiness. And I think it's funny because we also do, all of us lie a lot, like to either save ourselves time, right? So if we want to get out of something we don't want to go to, like, say a dinner or something like that with people that we don't really want to interact with. But the lie sort of like, either because we're timid or it preserves emotions or whatever, right? So we do lie a lot, I think. And in this case, it's interesting too, because the specific thing here is lying to ourselves. And you had brought something up too about, what truth do we actually know, or do we actually even know the truth? Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough question.
And part of it is even game theory, because you have to look like we don't survive by ourselves. We survive as a community. And as a community, if everybody was lying, then there would be no trust. However, if everybody was telling the truth, as soon as somebody started lying, they would have a big upper hand. So it's like, what balance is found there where you can, not lie all the time, not tell the truth all the time, but have that perfect amount to where you can most benefit from it. Like you mentioned with the Olympic athletes, how they lied to themselves just enough to be a world-class athlete.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about that too is like when you think about it in terms of the community, right? There has to be a certain amount of convention of truth telling so that we can, if I ask you the time on the street, I don't have to cross-reference with 15 other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
I assume it's right. At the same time, you're, in order to tell a lie, the assumption is everybody else believes you're telling the truth. But when you lie to yourself, it's weird because there's not the other, right? So like if I tell you a little lie, you assume I'm telling the truth. That's why it works. But when I lie to myself, I'm both parties in a weird way. I am, right? the
But,
one that's creating it and the one that's being lied to.
well, there's that
It's kind
saying,
of funny.
don't deceive yourself, and you're the easiest person to deceive.
Yeah.
Like, because okay, so for instance, in America, there's like a huge obesity epidemic, and it's not like we don't know how to combat that. But everybody's just like, oh, I'll just eat this one donut today. Oh, I'll just have this cheesecake tonight. I'll just won't exercise today. And we just lie to ourselves over and over and over again. And maybe it's the lack of responsibility for those lies.
Maybe, yeah. And you know what? Maybe that point that you just said, I think that really does hit on the difference, right? You have, if you think of like, we'll keep using the Olympic athlete because we already mentioned it. Fuck it, right? It's an example. If you think of the Olympic athlete, they have an insane amount of dedication to this one thing, right? And I imagine, yes, they probably have a lot of help. They have coaches, they have all these people in their corner, but they have a lot of personal responsibility towards that one thing, right? This, whatever their competition is, whatever they're competing in. The regular person, right? It's easy to deceive ourselves in ways like that are harmful because it makes our life more comfortable, easier, and we have to put in less effort. And I
Yeah.
think there is a difference, right, between those types of lying. One is like you're lying to yourself to make yourself better, to work harder, to, in a sense, right, almost help you get through or overcome the difficulties in the way. The other type of lying, though, is to kind of slide under those difficulties, right, and not do them or bypass them in some way. So I think that seems to be a big difference between the two types, which is, you're doing it for comfort or you're doing it to succeed in a way.
Well, I what you're talking about there is something that comes up pretty regularly in my life, and it's so frustrating. It's like holding myself accountable as opposed to other people holding me accountable. Like, for instance, one area where I'm encountering this on a regular basis in my life is just like learning computer programming, because 50% of computer programmers are self-taught, and going to school for programming would be awesome, except for in the United States, they charge way too much for school. And really, what's it worth if half of the people who are working actually taught themselves? So, like, while on one hand, it would be great to be able to go to a university and have somebody else have to be responsible to somebody else, read the material, study for the tests, do all this, be responsible to them. Whereas teaching myself, I just have to be responsible myself. So it's like, oh, I really don't feel like learning this right now. I would much prefer to just take a nap or, go grab something to eat. And it's like, myself, I can be like, you know what? You deserve it. You should just go do that.
Yeah.
And there's no like repercussions if I don't. So it's kind of like with lying, we can lie to ourselves over and over and over again. And it's not until we do it pretty regularly to where it becomes a pretty bad habit, to where it can be detrimental. Whereas if we start lying to society, people start talking about that, and they're like, "Oh, you can't trust him. He's not. You can't keep him to his word. He never follows through." And then you get a reputation, and there's a lot more negative repercussions.
Yeah, it is funny when you're doing like work at home, like projects that only really you're accountable for. It is easy to do that, right? And there's also that fine line because like I was dealing with that this week actually, where like, and last week where I'm working on a couple projects at home. One of them's pretty demanding. And like, I would get to these points where like I felt like I needed a break. And it's sometimes even hard to tell, like, am I lying to myself? Do I just want to be lazy tonight and not do anything? Or am I really reaching the point where, because I think there is a critical point where we can push ourselves too much and you burn yourself out a little. And it's good to take breaks from stuff. I think there is a value in that. But like, it is funny because I guess, yeah, it's this fine line. And if we do it too much, it can be a huge detriment. And I think, it's interesting, but it seems like it's also a critical part of life too, because the other side of this was they said people are happier. And this I found really interesting, right? That, we see self-deception in these negative ways all the time in the world. Like you said, like the obesity problem in America, the fact that we have all these, lifestyle drugs where people take a pill instead of changing certain habits in their life, like exercise, diet, stuff like that. It's easier, right, to do that. So it is like kind of self-deception. On the other hand, though, like I know like if I tell myself I can do something, I'm more likely to do it, right? I'm more likely to get it done. I'm more likely to do it. Whether that's true or not, it almost doesn't matter. And I think that's the interesting side of it. It's like a lie to help motivate you, give you confidence to overcome the obstacles where the truth or the truth of the matter at the moment might make it more difficult to get through those things, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it really comes down to not actually knowing what's true. Because a lot of times with these things we're doing to ourselves, lying or telling the truth, we're talking about the future. And so really, who knows about the future? Like we oftentimes think that we can predict the future based on the past, but even like financial analysts will tell you that past performance is no indicator of future results. So, what you've done previously has gotten you to where you were, but it has no bearing over what you can do in the future. And so by having more of an optimistic outlook, more of a positive, potentially even lying outlook, like with for instance, this study on the Olympic athletes, the ones who think that they're the best in the world and then they become a world record holder Olympian. Were they lying to themselves? No, fundamentally, no, they were telling the truth.
Yeah.
Like everybody who didn't come in first was lying to themselves, but the one person who said that and wasn't was lying to themselves. And even like a quantum, theory type of thing, everybody potentially up until that event, everybody was a winner. And then at the time of that event, a whole bunch of different realities diverged. And then we're all looking at that same reality where only that one person told the truth and everybody else was a liar.
Yeah, that's like where we only find it only has one outcome once we measure it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like only it's only when you measure it that you find out. That I think that's the funny part, right? Because maybe I think that was also on my mind in the background when I was listening to this, which is like that's the funny thing. It's like when we're talking about our happiness and our future, it's like there is a sense in which we don't know. So it makes sense just to have this sort of self-confidence and this little bit of lying peppered in that helps us just do these things because we talk about it all the time. The reality is I think most people could do pretty much whatever they want if they gave themselves the time and if they had the discipline and if they had this sort of they were able to develop some sort of routine to learn what they need to learn or whatever. I'm pretty positive most people can do anything. And I think that's it, right? It's that belief that you can do anything. And especially when it's directed at something, that little bit of lie, it's like, it's not really, it is a lie in a sense, but maybe not because it could turn out to be true. And if it helps you make it true, then what's the difference, right?
Yeah.
In a sense, no harm, no foul.
Yeah, because it is our mind that creates this world. So
Yeah.
if we live a lie, whatever that lie is, potentially that lie it becomes the world that we live in, and that becomes our truth. And that,
It's fun. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, that's
Sorry.
the rabbit hole. That's the paradox of life. Like, is it a lie? Is it truth? Because if you believe it, I think it was Hitler or somebody who said, like, lie to people enough times, they believe it's the truth.
Well, it's all we do is lie. I mean, like, in a certain sense, the whole social construct is a lie, right? I mean, so it is kind of funny because when you start to really examine this question, it starts to become very sketchy about what is a lie and what is truth. Because is truth only what's empirically verifiable? If that's the case, then I can only know the truth now. I can't know the truth in the future. So it's always a lie, essentially. If I tell myself I can or I can't do something, it's kind of a lie. I'm creating the future through my belief, right? Rather than just doing it and letting it happen however which way. In a way, I'm influencing the future that way, I guess, because I'm motivating myself or demotivating myself. But when you look at like the world around us, I mean, people are lying to themselves all the time, like as a culture, as a society. So I mean, the ideals we hold, the norms, all of that is
Dude,
fabricated,
we're in a time nowadays where it's like hard to trust. Like we don't know what news is true. We don't know a darn thing that politicians that say is true. Like even stuff online and email, like phishing emails and everything like that. Like all this stuff is we're just in this constant phase of, is this even real? Is this true? Can I trust this? Hmm. So
Yeah, it's a
from
crazy.
there, yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, I was gonna say it's crazy. We talk, it's like you look at like, I mean, when we were younger and you only had like the nightly news for half an hour, it was basically just a statement of facts. this happened, right? There was this explosion or this or whatever. And it's like 24-hour news, it's all opinion, it's all garbage. So it's like you have no idea what the hell the truth is
It's not only
and what they're
24-hour news, it's 24-hour news times 100 different stations. It's like 2,400-hour news, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. And it's funny too how like, the same facts, and I think that just shows you how we create our world, right? The same basic facts, the same starting point from a different political outlook result in a totally different interpretation of events, right? Which means that they are interpreted, which means that they're fabricated, which means that they're not really true. It's a matter of belief. And I think this gets to an interesting question, which is, is it all really like, are all these things that we worry about so much, like our abilities, our skill sets, self-confidence, happiness, is it all kind of at some point a matter of belief? Is it a matter of like faith or personal faith almost? And that's where maybe that lying part comes in. That makes us more likely to be happy if we lie a little bit to ourselves. I don't know.
Yeah, you touch on a good point there. It's like if we don't actually know what the truth is, like verifiably, we can't really tell things are verifiably true. Well, then if we're able to quote unquote lie, how do we best use this to create the best life possible?
Exactly. It's funny. I remember in what is it? I think it's in the Euthyphro, in Plato's Euthyphro. Socrates makes a point that, like he said something, I'll just paraphrase, but he says, like, look, the gods, they don't argue about like factual things like measurements or weights, right? Like if there was a dispute about how long a room is, you just measure it, or how tall a person is, you can measure it and you can verify it. They do argue, like the gods argue about like what's good, what's beautiful, what's just, right? These evaluative concepts. And you see the same all the time in human life, right? We don't need to argue about something that we can weigh or measure right now because that can solve the problem. But the issue is that that's not the meaning of it. That's just a statement of how long it is, right? It doesn't tell us what's the influence, what's its importance. When you get into those questions, that's where all the debate comes in. And I think that's true for the individual, right? Like we don't know, we don't have a guaranteed way to, resolve our evaluative conflicts or our beliefs or our ideologies. So it does become this matter of argument, this matter of effectively lying, right? To a certain extent.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess since I don't know, we all lie, we all tell the truth, and how best to effectively make use of this. One thing that comes to mind for me is it was in one of these books, like The Power of Positive Thinking or something like that I was reading, where he was saying that like a lot of us think that we're being rational. We're like, I'm not optimistic. I'm just reasonable. I'm a rational person. And
Yeah.
and so he says, like for an entire day, like every time you feel like you're being reasonable, go ahead and see what it's like to be optimistic. And then he's like, once you do that for a day, do it for a week, and then after you do it for a week, do it for a month, and then you'll realize that this being reasonable, being rational, is really just being a pessimist. Like,
Yeah.
like literally, you're just being a pessimist, and it really comes down to choice, because we always have choice in the moment how to look at it, our perspective on it. Can we have a positive light on it? Can we have a negative light on it? And really, which one of those is true? Who knows? But which one's going to benefit you? And I tend to think that having the optimistic outlook is generally going to benefit you in most situations.
I like that. I like that example too, because you tell yourself you're being reasonable, you're really being pessimistic. So you're lying to yourself already, right? About what you're doing. Like to make it more, to stomach it more. I think too, I honestly do think sometimes too, I think the pessimism is as much of a lie, but it's a lie to also keep yourself from having to do things, right? It's a lie sometimes to not have to face those obstacles, to not have to face your fears. It prevents you from having to take action, from having to be motivated and take responsibility for your life, right? It's easy sometimes. I mean, I know it's a weird contrast because it's like you're unhappy, but there's also comfort in the norm and what you know. And so it's easy to sort of be like, oh, I can't do it and just stay in my shitty situation. It's harder, actually, I think, sometimes to lie to yourself and tell you you can do it. But you're right. I think when you accept, like, even if it's a lie, that positivity makes life, it does make life better. It does. And I think with that, you can also lie to yourself and develop confidence in a way, right? Like almost like, the can do attitude. That might be sort of a lie. I get, but see, this is the funny thing. It's like, I don't even know if it is at the end of the day. I don't know if either are really. It's like what we tell ourselves and then what we make true. It's so weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard it said that you're not actually lying. Like when you say these positive things, like if you feel like a turd and you're like, I feel great today, you're not actually lying. You're just speaking the truth in advance. So like you start like saying that stuff and then you start feeling good and then it's true.
I like all these clever rationalizations around the problem, right? So it's, we know it's funny too, though, because they say, right? They say like, there was a study done that I had heard about, and this is, sorry, it's vague, but like where like smiling, right, increases, it can actually make you happier because there's like that release, right? The chemical release and stuff that comes with it. Same with laughing. And I think there's a truth there with positivity, right? If you lie, it actually makes it true because you start to release those chemicals, you start to feel better. And I think there's also just that connection between, like, I know myself. It makes sense sometimes to lie to myself and convince myself that I'm positive about something or ready for it because it makes me just more energized and ready to do it and happier to do it, right? And I think when you really look at it, like, what's the point of going through life pessimistic? I don't understand. It sucks. I mean, I get getting stuck in that way of thinking. I understand that completely. I understand, you know, I understand why, how people can get depressed and stuff, obviously, but like, if it's making a choice, I think the choice is obvious to choose, right? Pessimism, trying to be confident and can do, right?
Here's something that I just thought of. Okay?
No, right.
Because I'm thinking on the other hand, like telling the truth. Sometimes there are times when telling the truth is really, really difficult, you know? And I know like the back in the 70s when they made LSD illegal, there were certain communes where they found that just telling the truth, this radical honesty, was just as potent as LSD. And so like I was just thinking that kind of an answer may be between lying and telling the truth. Do whichever one is more difficult, because that's
Well,
like,
okay, so in what sense? In like,
well,
in the sense of,
so like when you're faced with a situation where you can lie and or you can tell the truth, if you do the one
oh,
that's more difficult, then that's like a character building. That'll build your virtue. That's definitely a character building situation because it's usually the truths that are the most difficult to tell that are the ones that we need to tell. And
okay,
maybe
so you're saying,
and maybe
okay.
similarly, it's the lies that are most difficult that are the ones we need to tell ourselves. Like, I can actually do this, even though you're not sure, you're lying to yourself, but you need to tell yourself that one.
Oh, okay, I like that. So like, so I am upset or I am pessimistic. Lying to yourself in that case is actually harder, but you need to tell yourself because that gets you to where you need to be, overcoming that problem. It enables you to help overcome that problem, which is the more difficult thing in the situation than letting your limitations sort of define you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or conversely, right? Like, the truth, we can all imagine, and I think that lots of situations where the truth is difficult to say, but that truth is going to make your life a lot better. Like, they always say that with, good examples of that actually are addiction is always a good one, where they say once you admit it and you start to talk to people about it, then it's going to be, that's when you start overcoming it because now it's real, right? Whereas before you can keep kind of lying to yourself or keep a deception up. Now it's like you have to address it because it is in the world. Even,
Mm-hmm.
and you're forcing others who might have been denying it to address it, right? So I think that, yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Maybe whatever, is the more difficult choice now will help us get to that point where life is better and we start to make those choices on our own without needing that. Because I think there is that also, that flip, right? Where like, I'm sure this must happen for the athletes as well and stuff where, you know, I tell myself to be positive or I tell myself I can do this, but there's a point where I realize I am positive and I can do this, right? And it's like there's that switch where like you've overcome the barrier and now you're going and it's
Fake
good.
it till you make it.
Yeah.
We're all just little kids playing pretend who forgot that we're little kids playing pretend.
Yeah. It's funny. I've heard people criticize that idea, fake it till you make it. And it's funny because it's like, I think when they criticize it, I don't know, maybe I don't know in full why they're critiquing it, but like, it's funny because there's so much that we lie about, that we don't know. And like, I guess when I think of truth, I always think of it philosophically. So I have no clue what's real. I have no idea. I don't think anything is. I think
Yeah.
all it's a construct. So maybe that's part of it. But I always saw value in that because I think part of like, I mean, at least for me, I've always thought of like self-confidence, knowing what you're capable of. A lot of that does involve a certain sort of like self-deception, or I mean, you can call it faith in oneself if you want. Do whatever, call it whatever the hell you want. It's a lie either way, right?
Yeah.
And whatever gets you there.
I think when I've heard the criticisms of it, they're talking about how like you're putting on airs and like uh and but like exactly. Glad you got that. And,
I think one of the best episodes of that show.
yeah, right. And so they just think like you don't deserve to do it. Like I've heard, and you end up being a person who you're not. But that's the thing is you have what you have because of who you are. And like in life, you have the results you have because of who you are. And if you want different results, you're going to have to be somebody else. So faking it till you make it actually kind of makes sense, because then you're being that someone else, or at least your best interpretation of what that someone else is, until you can actually have what you want.
Yeah, I think maybe I think maybe that is part of it. Maybe it's like, I think that people that critique it are afraid of like you're being inauthentic. But at the same time, I guess the way in which we're talking about it too is it's more of like helping boost yourself to start to develop the habits and stuff that you want. Because look, even if you look at Aristotle's virtue ethics, right, and you look at habituation, he says, right, if you want to be just, you got to do just things. So you got to practice it and you got to do it. Part of that is kind of faking it at the beginning, because you're not a just person yet, right? You are not virtuous the moment you start doing it. For Aristotle, it's not until you develop the habit. So it's not until you've done it for quite a long time that it becomes part of who you are. The whole up till that point, you're kind of faking it, right? You're reminding yourself to do it all the time. You're forcing yourself to do it
You kind of have
until
to
it
fake
happens.
it. Like look at a child pretending to walk. And this is the example that everybody uses for everything. But like they have to fake being able to walk for a little bit until they're actually able to do it. Same thing with riding a bike. You have to fake that you can do it, and you just keep getting that feedback until you can actually do it.
Maybe, yeah, maybe fake is like the wrong word. Maybe it's like it's just when we say fake, it means just like you have to put in the effort. You have to try, you have to go through the trial and error, you have to practice, you have to do the things to get to the point where you're actually competent, right?
Mhm.
Because we all start out as, no matter what we're doing, if it's something new, all of us don't have the full skill set we need right away. But that doesn't mean we can't do it. I think that's what a lot of people do find so hard in life, is they want to do something new, they want to try something, but they're afraid because like, I don't have all these skills, I don't have 10 years of experience. It's like, dude, it doesn't matter. Just start doing it, and you'll get there, right? Eventually you'll have all that and you'll have what you need. It's just going to be harder at first, and you need to pretend like you know what you're doing for a
Mhm.
little while, but then you'll get
Yeah.
there. And I think, yeah, that's kind of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the best examples I love for this type of thing, and I may not be able to tell it properly, but basically, like anything you want to take on is going to take a good amount of time to do it. And so, whatever age you are now, like I'm 38 now, and it's like, oh, I want to be a good computer programmer, but that's going to take 10 years. And it's like, well, what about when you're 48 and you want to be a good computer programmer? And it's like, oh, well, that'll take 10 years. And it's like, well, you're going to be 48 anyways. So you might as well just get started and just do it.
Yeah, but I love that because it's so true. It's like, dude, if I want this, why am I wasting time? Just start doing it, right? Just get there, because it's going to take the same amount of time either way. And if you do it now, at least now in 5 years, you'll be halfway there. Whereas if you
Mhm.
wait till you're 48, you'll still not have started. It's like,
Exactly.
yeah, it's funny. It is. I think this is the thing with, and I think you're right. It's that especially in like the United States, as Judeo-Christian like morality, the idea that lying is this horrible thing. We're told that when we're younger, and in truth, like the type of lying they're talking about, I think, is very specific, right? It's like lying to others to get something that you want, self-interested, like taking advantage of someone, which we might agree is for the most part wrong, right? So like saying something to somebody to like lying to them to get money, or doing something disingenuous, whatever. But like what we're talking about, I think, is something that everyone does. That's actually an important part of life. And I think the people that don't do it, you can actually see struggle more. And I know myself, I've struggled more when I don't do this in life, because it seems to be crucial for taking those steps to move forward to become the person we want to be, right? It's almost like, it's like you said, like you have to convince yourself you are that person before you get there in order to imagine it and become it. And also, I think, it's like make adjustments along the way so that when you become that person, it's the person you really want to be, right? And it takes that sort of like lying and imagination and creation and trial and error. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, everybody says that lying is bad, but then we have these other things that are good, like faith and hope and belief, and those are good. But theoretically, they're all kind of the same thing. And so it's really choosing which ones you want to harness. Because I strongly believe in faith and belief and hope and all that stuff. Like I think that's absolutely critical. And I've been able to do some pretty amazing things in life because of that, because I believed it, because I was willing to lie to myself that it was possible when it seemed like it was impossible. You know?
It's funny, right? All these words we have that, depending on the word you use, can give it such a different connotation when it's the same thing. Like I think of that all the time, like self-confidence, faith in oneself, self-deception, lying to oneself. They all get to the same end. And I think they all do the exact same thing. So it's like, call it, I guess, what you want and move forward. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's just that we have an imprecise language. A lot of like, especially like, when it comes to like our own beliefs and stuff, a lot of it is imprecise. I think a lot of it is, it's unclear because it's not necessarily something factual. It's not something we can measure, right? So it's not something that's easily empirically verifiable in the world. So we don't ever know what's true. So it's like, it requires a certain level of just, okay, I believe it. That's it. Let's go. Let's move forward and go from there.
Well, the crazy thing is like a lie can become a truth, and also a truth can become a lie. So like they're not these things that are stuck. They're definitely they move.
I like how this has been very confusing on truth and lying by definition, but we've been clear that we think lying's good in certain cases.
Yeah, right.
We've been absolutely certain about that. So that's at least a takeaway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think it's so interesting, man. It's so funny because it's such a rabbit hole to even think of this stuff. And you just, you look at the world around you and you just see people just talk so much bullshit, especially with microphones. I think it's funny. And it's like, so I think for the individual, at least, it really comes down to like, what's going to make your life better now? What's going to, like, one way I always think about it too is like, what are the challenges before me? And what beliefs do I really need to meet them, to overcome them, and to deal with them? Does it mean I have to lie to myself a little now? Okay, fine. If that helps me motivate myself, have the energy, have the attitude, and want to do the things before me that I really want to do, then that's fine. I think there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's a good idea, and I think it'll definitely make me happier because I'll be living the life that I want ultimately as I move forward, right?
Mm-hmm. And it's also something that it probably wouldn't be possible to do if there wasn't some benefit to it. Like it would have been evolutionarily taken out of our ability to do if there wasn't some benefit to it. And it kind of reminds me of the virtues that you talk about, where you have to find the golden mean. You have to find between lying and truth. You have to kind of strike the mean wherever that is, and that mean could change depending upon situations, depending upon people that are involved. All types of stuff is going to be different in each situation.
Yeah, I think that's important, right? Is that, we often talk about these things in a very sort of like global or blanket way, like this is the case, blah, this is the case, blah. But in the reality, it's like if you look at every situation in minute detail, they're so different. There's so many different factors. It's like, yeah, I might need to lie to myself a little now, but in the next case, I won't, because it's not a question. You'll do it, right? Or you can get it done. And it's like, you've already developed that or whatever. And like all these little changes actually, and all these situational differences amount to slight differences in what you need to do in your approach. So it's like being mindful, I think, is the important thing here. Knowing, what's called for in the situation is the right thing. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
So anything else?
So much of it comes down to just pleasure and pain, I think, right? There's like original guiding stones for human beings. Like this hurts, stay away. This feels good, go towards it. Mm-hmm. I think so much of our life really does come down to just that, right? And understanding, what can help us, but also not being deceived by what's easy now instead of doing what's hard now. I mean, we talked about that so much, and I think that is crucial. Like, and I think maybe that's the right point. If lying helps me do what's more difficult now, then I should do that. And that will
Yeah.
help me.
It's kind of crazy. Like Teddy Roosevelt talked about the strenuous life. And he's someone that I really admire because he did so much stuff. It like
Oh,
so much stuff. Like it's mind-blowing how much he actually accomplished. And he talks about the strenuous life all the time. It's not like it was any of it was easy. He just like constantly chose what's the most difficult thing I can do. All right, let's go do it.
yeah.
And so like, but that's something that builds character and it builds virtue. And it's what kind of a lot of what this like modern Stoic books are talking about is like building this character. It's not easy and it's going to suck a lot of the time, but it's worth
Yeah,
it.
when I think it is worth it. I think that's just it, right? It's worth it. I think people underestimate the value of being a good person, however you define it, and like what that means. And I think they also underestimate the fact that like, yeah, like if you choose the hard things and you do what's difficult, like it does get easier in a sense later because you've done all this stuff already. You can keep doing it, but it's always going to be difficult. And I think there is value in that. And like this expectation that things have to be immediate and easy has really sort of hindered us in moving forward and being the people we want. I think that is difficult. So, there are times where you kind of need to help push yourself a little bit, right? So the lie there comes in again.
Yeah. Well,
Well.
I mean, I've really enjoyed talking every week, particularly the past few weeks, because I've been going through like a lot of uncomfortable times and like challenging times. And my mind keeps telling me, oh, there must be something wrong because it's not comfortable. Meanwhile, and then after we talk, I'm like, oh no, it's because I'm trying to do some really difficult stuff. That's why it's uncomfortable. And like, so it helps me to realize that every week that, even though things are not comfortable and they're not easy and they're challenging and you may not like them, it doesn't mean that you need to change them.
Yeah, I know. I think dude, that's a great point. It's one of the reasons why I love doing this too. It's because it's like, it's a constant reminder that, a lot of the good things in life, they take time, they take a lot of effort, and they're hard. They wouldn't, I mean, I always kind of think of it in a very simplistic way. It's like, if somebody just gave me money for everything I wanted, I wouldn't value any of the stuff that I got, right? Because it's just handed to you. But when you have to work for something and save up for it and plan, that thing has a lot more value. And I know this is like a simple way of looking at it, but it's because you put the effort in to get it. It's yours in the strict sense, right? Of like my effort, my work, my responsibility, my choice. It's totally mine. And I think looking at your own life that way is a good way to look at your life. Like, is my life totally mine? Is the effort I put in all mine, and so forth and so on. And when you look at it that way, like it's going to be hard, but it'll be a lot better and more valuable overall, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything else for this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should just touch on at the end that, even though we said lying is really good, there
Yeah,
not
yeah, it's true, probably, right?
it's within reason. So don't go out there and become like a
Yeah.
just a constant liar. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess this is the difficulty, right? It's like, well, and we also mentioned too, we deceive ourselves also to make our lives, in a sense, to keep our lives the same and not do better. So this is the difficulty, right? I think we are saying lying is good in certain cases where lying promotes self-growth, positive development, and a happier life. We are saying lying is negative, where lying promotes the same, continued depression, continued negativity, and so forth and so on.
Yeah,
And
or
I think,
worsens
yeah,
your own or other people's lives. Yeah.
yeah, there you go. Perfect. Yeah, that's lying, and
Hmm.
the benefits and the harms of lying right there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you said before, right? It's situational. It's trying to know yourself, being aware of the situation, and making the choice dependent upon that. It's context sensitive.
Mm, bingo.
There we go.
Hmm.
All right, that is good. Yeah, good.
Yeah. Well, you did the intro, so you have to do
Oh
the
yeah, I
outro,
did do
man.
the intro. I'm sorry.
Every
Okay,
time.
yeah, I gotta do that. All right, so that was good. Yeah, so that was so that was the benefits of lying. You know, can lying help your life? I think we've agreed that it can. Thanks for joining us, episode 32 of the Existential Stoic podcast. If you guys are listening to us on the podcast, please check us out on YouTube. We have the channel now, and vice versa. If you're checking us out on YouTube, please check us out on the podcast. Please, like, share, and subscribe. That's all important. It helps us out a lot. We'll be back midweek with another quick fix. This week, we're going to talk about habit creation. So join us to find out the tips for that. And we have other exciting stuff coming up this month. Can't wait. So we will be back. It was a lot of fun, Randy. Take care.
Later, Danny.
Later, Randy.